All right, welcome everybody to the DMTx Psychonaut training. I'm really excited for Daniel McQueen to put this on of Medicinal Mindfulness. This is going to be a really great webinar. I'm excited to learn all about DMTx. If you don't know who I am, my name is Kyle. I don't know, down on our little box it says Joe, but I'm Kyle from Psychedelics today. And we're helping Daniel get this information out and partnered up with him. So yeah, welcome Daniel. Thanks for putting this on, and thanks for inviting us to be part of it.
Yeah, well, thank you for helping me make it happen. This is definitely a group effort at this point. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our program. And I'd also like to thank Andy, who is someone on our end who has been really helping me out to keep me sane as we figure out how to handle the technology while also developing a whole program. So let me turn my phone off now that we're all here. So I would like to take a moment before we begin talking about the DMT experience to just introduce who we are, not just what we do, but kind of where we're coming from. And because it's a unique space. Many of us don't have a life. Hold on, let me move some things around a little bit so I can sort of see. Many of us aren't in a position to be fully open about our interest in our identities as psychedelic people. So I just want to honor and name that I am very privileged in this way, living where I am in some ways. To be able to speak openly and to have an identity that's open as a medicine person. And so I'm speaking from a position of privilege and deep gratitude and honor for living in Colorado, where we can, where there's more openness about this, particularly in regards to cannabis too, as a psychedelic. And I'm also speaking from the perspective and also speaking to a community that have experienced discrimination and trauma because of our identities. So, this is dedicated to all those who have to keep your identity secret. And that we're all working hard to make that, to shift that. And that, it's okay. Stay safe and stay connected with community so you don't feel super isolated and alone wherever you are. So medicinal mindfulness has been going for since 2012 under a psychotherapy program, but we pulled it out of that pretty quick to step into a larger field. And now we're a psychedelic community. We're open and we facilitate regular psychedelic experiences in legal settings. We've been working with cannabis, sativa in this way for about 5 years professionally. And so I'm an open, active psychedelic facilitator using a very unusual medicine that we have kind of ignored as the psychedelic community, the full potential of it. So I also like to say that this work and the program, the DMT program, is pretty much all psychedelic inspired, but this has been a process for me, and it's really intertwined with my own personal interests and development as a human being at this point. So doing this webinar, the seminar, is an opportunity for us to receive feedback, and your participation has also allowed me to devote some of my professional time to really creating something that I think is wonderful. So I'm very grateful for that. But we're practicing what I call a psychedelic philosophy of living into a possibility or an intention, and that I'm confident that we can make this happen. And I also don't know all the steps that we're going to have to take to make it happen. There's a lot that we still have to learn, but I've got several teams of people playing with these ideas and questions and how to make it happen. So really wonderful people. I'm going to share a little bit about that too. So again, I don't know if you've, some of you who signed up today might have not received my welcome email and first assignment of just asking who you are. And so we'll resend that to later tonight with the PDF of the worksheets that I'm going to send out after this seminar. So again, we really want to hear from you. If you don't mind being mindful of the length of your emails and your feedback, because there are a lot of people on this, and it's helpful for me to be able to receive something that I can read pretty quickly. I also want to name that this is, in a sense, like a radical psychedelic harm reduction program, using the model of harm reduction, reducing harm of medicine experiences through objective education, and but also as a medicine person and a psychedelic medicine facilitator, using language that's non-judgmental to our community is really important to me, because the reality is we don't it's not all about reducing harm. These psychedelics, when used safely with intention, can be deeply healing. And then the last piece I just want to name is that we're only work in legal settings, and I definitely am pushing some edges, societal edges, even though we're working in just legal settings. But working with cannabis as a psychedelic, we do breath work, and then we're also, a lot of us are members of the Native American Church, so that's a regular, somewhat annual experience for members of our local community. So again, we're exploring ways to live into psychedelic society in the present moment. And one of the things I discovered pretty quickly was that after learning about this research idea, the Extended-State DMT research proposal from Dr. Strassman, and that this really was like the peak of the peak experience. I thought our fullest potential as a global psychedelic society. Like, it doesn't really feel like there's much else that we can do that would go beyond this as explorers. And that definitely caught my attention. And I'd like to share with you tonight like an overview of the program, make sure we're all on the same page, and if anybody has any questions in that regard. And then also, what else was I gonna share with you? Some mindfulness practices that you can use to get started, and why you'd want to use them, why they're relevant to this program. Because not all of us have mindfulness practices that are psychedelic medicine users. So you're going to be getting some assignments. All of this is, optional, of course. And if you don't want to do something out of confidentiality, I completely understand that. It's confidential on our end, but we are on the internet and things. You're going to be getting some guided meditations and handouts, and some recommended readings and other practices. Today we're going to orient you. We're going to talk about DMTx, what it is, and then foundational practices. The second class, we're going to talk about more advanced practices that build on the foundational practices, inner tracking, how to move in psychedelic spaces, but also how to heal trauma, because we want people as DMT psychonauts to be well resourced and resilient, right? And so we want to teach you some practices to clear some of that stuck stuff, so that it's not impairing our ability to do this work safely. Might be also talking, like maybe a third or fourth one, talking about setting sacred space, how to stay energetically safe. We'll talk about integration. And then last but not least, we'll talk about shadow work and what that means. Because what I've found is that this work of waking up requires us to look at our difficult aspects, and so having a language, a shared language, and a capacity to engage that appropriately is one of the most healing experiences we can have as a psychedelic community. And personally, I think this shadow work is probably one of the most important things that we can share with the rest of the world. But we got to get better at learning how to do it. Let me just see what else. So again, what Kyle, what Kyle said about if you can't make a class, that's okay. We're going to get it all on the Teachable platform. And And then also there's a lot of background material already online through the Medicinal Mindfulness YouTube channel. The channel itself is called Psychedelics Shine, and that is a speaker series that we do. And the last several of these have been Extended-State DMT specific. And so and some of the presentations I've done at Naropa and other places are on there too. So I really recommend checking out the one called Cyber DMT and Trans Cannabis. It was in February of last year when we did an event at the Boulder Theater with Dennis McKenna. That really shows like the big vision of what we're up to here. So I'm gonna switch to showing I'm going to make sure. How are we doing, everybody? Are we all good? It looks like I'm just checking the letters. I'm going to switch this to sharing a screen. And I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Let me get this thing out of the way. There we go. All right. So it looks like I can't see I can't see the comments, Kyle, while I'm in the full view. So if anything shows up, just let me know, okay?
Yeah, we'll do.
Let me try one more thing real quick. I got to move this little box. It's blocking my vision. All right, so let's get started. This is one of the first articles. It went viral, and I'd like to acknowledge Riley for writing it. It connected me with a wonderful human being named Egan, who's part of New Nautics. And so many of you might have connected through our program by writing Egan first. And so I didn't know this at the time, but I think this is what we are doing, is like long-term goal is to build some sort of psychedelic machine. It wasn't my intention in the very beginning, but it's just becoming more and more obvious that it's technologically possible. So, but this is probably like a many year process. Another thing I want to name this is a new series on Gaia TV called Psychedelica. Psychedelics and the Battle of Consciousness is the first episode. It's just coming out. And I'm going to be featured on it, and the DMT program is being featured on it. It's also a great opportunity to support media, psychedelic media. So the first month is free. And if you sign up through this gaia.com/psychedelica, the series itself will get credit for bringing in new sponsor or new subscribers. And the reason I really want to support this is that Ben's an amazing producer, and some of these topics that are coming up are pretty spectacular, cutting edge, not a repeat of a lot of what we've already seen online and on TV. Just to give you guys a little background, this is one of our first logos, and eventually I think it's going to turn into a t-shirt. But I wanted you might have seen this image, so I wanted to explain it. I was thinking, how do we describe this idea symbolically, right? And the idea of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, as an infinity symbol, as the loop of the IV line. And then I looked at the actual needle image, and I was Googling images to see what things look like, and I thought that looked like a dragonfly. And in a lot of native traditions, dragonfly is the capacity to see beyond illusion. And the other option we were playing with was the butterfly, which is transformation. But I landed on the dragonfly. So this is going to eventually become a badge of some sort, and a t-shirt and things. But I really like this image for the symbolism that it is, but it's not super obvious why we chose it. This is our first attempt to visually represent the experience, more on a kind of a sci-fi, fun, kind of pulp fiction way. This is a sketch done by my buddy Elliot, and there's going to be a lot more images like this coming out. We're trying to figure out a way to kind of manifest and bring in an image, an idea that nobody, not anybody has done in this context before. So we were trying to create some ways of expressing that. And so so creative art is going to be an important part of our process. Before I talk about the DMT experience and the project that we're doing, I wanted to introduce some of the core components of psychedelic or medicinal mindfulness and our primary orientation. We come from a holistic perspective instead of purely scientific, purely psychological, or spiritual, or creative. And that most psychedelic medicine use fits into one of these four categories. Psychedelics used for religious experiences, psychedelics used for psychological healing, research, exploration, problem solving, like James Fadiman and, the LSD, microdosing, and then also, creativity, play, music, celebration. Even we're experiencing, there are a lot of psychedelic medicine people who are activists, political activists in the world, even if they're not out in that way. And so psychedelics are primarily used in these four different contexts. And what we're doing with medicinal mindfulness is bringing these different contexts into individual experiences, bringing them all together, right? Not being one or the other, scientific or creative, or psychological or spiritual, but that these, when we bring them together, they balance each other out. That the psychological exploration helps us stay grounded and not spiritually bypass in religious exploration. Creativity and play helps us stay curious and open-minded in the scientific world. And then the scientific worldview and psychedelics keeps people in the creative, playful areas safer. Psychedelic harm reduction at festivals and that sort of thing. So this is what it looks like when we start bringing this concept, this holistic concept, into a research experiment. That in the North, this is based on a medicine wheel model from a lot of different esoteric teachings and Native American teachings. That we're, we're really, one of our foundations is to be congruent with scientific inquiry, right? We've gotten some flack for this because we're exploring this idea of entities and beings and things, but everything we're doing is going to be congruent with scientific inquiry. But on the bottom, it's also congruent with the identity of the psychedelic community. And what that means is we're not necessarily ignoring or minimizing the weird aspects of this work because it doesn't conform with mainstream expectations. And I think that's important because some of these unusual phenomenon are some of the most intriguing to our community. So we wanted to create a container that honored the interest of the psychedelic community as opposed to attempting to be legitimized by the mainstream only, on the left of the screen, providing psychological support, we got so many therapists and healers interested in supporting us in this work, and they're all incredibly gifted. So the psychonauts would, besides the assessments and interviews that we'd be doing, there's going to be an incredible amount of real support, and this support would be congruent with our identity and belief system as opposed to just talking about hallucinations and things. We treat the inner experience as real. And then the last piece is honoring the spiritual beliefs of our community. 86% or so of the world's population believes in something other than this world. And so it's not that radical to consider the possibility that there's something beyond this space. What the radical nature of it is, is the fact that we can induce these experiences as opposed to them being some, spontaneous experience, religious rapture or that sort of thing, that we can actually induce it pretty quickly. So this is kind of where we're coming from, and I'm okay if we're all not okay with the spiritual component of this research, but this is our expression of what we want to do, and that there are neuroscientists at the what is it, the Imperial School of London or College of
Yep.
London, doing DMT research that's very neuroscientifically based, and that's not quite where we're headed, even though we wish to be congruent with their scientific inquiry. We are going to be doing a lot of brain scanning, though, for instance. The last primary orientation that I want to name, because this is why we're doing a webinar and why we're training people to be psychonauts, is that we've added a dimension to the classic statement, set and setting, as being the primary factors of these experiences. What I realized one day, talking with some of my elders and engaging this work, is that in not naming that there are skill sets that we can develop, we can cultivate, mindfulness practices, psychological resiliencies and things, that we are not as much in the driver's seat as we can be with these experiences. And so we've added skill to this kind of trinity, so to speak, to help balance it out. And I talk about this in other places, so I'll probably leave it at that right now, because we're going to talk about these skill developments and resiliency developments and things. But the idea is, the more you develop these capacities to engage inner psychedelic experiences, the deeper, further you can go in them, and the more resilient you are, the less maybe potential for injury can take place, and then the more you can bring back and integrate into your lives. So this is a real important, this is like it's called medicinal mindfulness. Our program's called Medicinal Mindfulness. So embedded even in the name, the name came even before I understood this idea, but like skill sets to bring into these practices. And then the last piece that how do we even talk about this? We're coming from a space that we consider the possibility that the inner experience is somehow objectively real and not just happening in our minds, in our psyches, in our brains. That doesn't mean I have to fully wholeheartedly believe that. I think doubt and questioning things is a core characteristic, an honored characteristic of the psychedelic community, right? We question authority, we question religious beliefs, but from a transpersonal perspective, which I got my master's in transpersonal counseling psychology. The name transpersonal was created by Stan Groff to describe these beyond the personal, sometimes spiritual, numinous experiences, that we really want to honor that, and that these types of experiences are some of the most healing, some of the most meaningful experiences that psychedelic medicine people have. And to say that it's all in your head, or to say that it's just a neurological shift of wiring or something, doesn't fully honor the experience itself. Rick Strassman describes what the most surprising thing of the original DMT work that he did was that most of the people described the experiences as more real than real. And I can talk about my theories and ideas around that. But what do you do with an inner experience that feels more real than your life experience? How do you incorporate that in your life? And for me, my experiences with dimethyltryptamine, it wasn't just the experience itself that could sometimes jarring. It was the implications of the experience, really having a direct experience of something that felt more real than anything I'd ever experienced before. So how do you orient to this reality after something like that? It's a really big question for us. This image is one of my favorite images from alchemy. It's showing an alchemist breaking through to the numinous space from normal reality, and as you can see, it made him flat on his belly. These are experiences that are beyond evocative. So we're trying to actively figure out how to explore that. And this is another reason why we want to train psychonauts is because, I do see differences in qualities of people's experiences. And this is something that Rick Strassman points out too as well. How are we doing, Kyle, on any questions or anything before we move forward?
No question, but there was a comment by Mark. Says, I always considered how, on a scientific level, we know there are more dimensions than simply the third. The numinous space may simply be the next rung under the ladder.
Yeah. So that's how, that's more real than real. Well, what is more real than 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, which is space-time, right? It would be an experience of perceiving more than 4 dimensions. It would be like being able to see a space that is just simply more complex and more full than anything we've ever experienced before. And psychedelics, and particularly DMT, allow us to take a right turn from all of reality, right? And so when you turn towards, like, you can shift all of reality, and there's something there. That is a big question. Dr. Gallimore, if y'all watch our recording of Dr. Gallimore's presentation on our psychedelic shine, he talks about this pretty extensively and uses like a computer model programming to explore that a 3rd-dimensional being can perceive a 2-dimensional being, but a 2-dimensional one can't perceive a 3rd-dimensional one. It's kind of where we're at. We're stuck in this mindset of limited dimensional awareness. And psychedelics, particularly DMT, allow us to perceive more dimensionally. At least that's one theory, right? And the implications of that are then that human beings have a natural capacity to perceive more dimensionally than we do. One question, who are the DMT elves, is, they might be us. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the history of the lineage of this idea of extended-state DMT. And since this is a scientific experiment, like naming and defining a few things, is at least one thing called extended-state DMT is important. I became aware of the proposal pretty much right after it was published. This is July 2016. I had met Rick Strassman through a mutual friend, and he had already come up to speak at one of our psychedelic shines, and he forwarded this to me. And I was, intrigued but more confused than anything when I first saw it. But I wanted to share that I used this image. You see this image of the anesthesia machine. This is what I want to correct a mistake I made in my first presentation on cyber DMT, that this is the wrong anesthesia machine. Everybody was talking about putting DMT through an anesthesia machine. And so this is what I thought they were talking about. And then I really started getting into the science and and researching online what they were saying. And I'll go over what they're really doing. But basically, Dr. Gallimore used Rick Strassman's original DMT research, the hard numbers, and you put it into a pharmacokinetic model, which is basically the models they use to ensure that anesthesia in the body during a surgery stays at a constant level. It doesn't go too up because that could kill you. It doesn't go too down or that'll knock you back into consciousness, and you might not really like that experience. So that's where it came from. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that even.
Hey, Daniel, there's a question. Is there a link for this paper anywhere?
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle of my website, DMTx.org. And I was going to send the paper as part of as an attachment to the email I'm sending out later tonight with the first assignment. It's a good paper, but it's pretty complex, and it took me a while to kind of untangle it. Because I'm coming, I have my practices in psychotherapy, healing modalities, facilitation, and things. I'm not coming from a neuro, a scientific mindset directly. Here's Gallimore and Dr. Strassman, two really cool dudes. They've been very kind and allowed me to ask them all kinds of questions about this work. what's in a name? So last year, I had some pretty long conversations and email correspondence with Dr. Gallimore. I figured since he's the one that came up with the idea, maybe we should include him in the conversation of what we're naming it. Stable state DMT and extended state DMT were two names that were commonly used in the actual study itself. Continuous infusion study is what Dr. Strassman describes this as, so you might hear it described as that. I think Joe came up with extended stay DMT, like an extended stay hotel or something. I thought that was funny. Cyber DMT, you know, I have a background. When I was a kid, I used to play role-playing games and things, and to me, this was the epitome of like cyberpunk using advanced technology to jack into an alternate reality, you know, Matrix type experience. So that's more, we're not using that one much. It's more of kind of a nickname. XDMT is something that we considered in the beginning. It's like extreme DMT, but it also has this connotation of like like getting out of DMT, like ex-wife or something like that. So there's this connotation there that didn't quite make sense for us to use. And then we finally landed on DMTx as a shorthand. I got tired of typing extended state DMT, and it doesn't make a lot of sense as like for like domain names and things like that. So we ended up using DMTx as a shorthand version of what we're officially calling extended state DMT. And there's also a hyphen between extended and state, and that makes, to our opinion, we decided that makes it a noun as opposed to a descriptor of a DMT-like experience. It's actually a thing, just extended state DMT. This is from their paper. This is the DMT concentration in nanograms per milliliter in the blood. And this is the average of Rick Strassman's people. And that the peak experience is this blue area that lasts about 5 to 7 minutes. This was the averages. Extended state DMT allows us, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but I wanted to show you these things. I'll read you a little bit about the extended state. I wrote something that's useful. Extended state DMT allows us to go into the peak and then moderate it so that it's stabilized, that the nanograms per milliliter concentration of DMT in the bloodstream that corresponds to a peak experience, it can stay flat, and that's important. And just to give some context, if you look at the bottom here, this is something that Dr. Gallimore shared in his presentation, is that the average typical ayahuasca peak is 20 nanograms a milliliter. So this isn't the same as saying, well, why not just use ayahuasca? The answer is because if we do it this way, it's literally 5 times stronger than the typical ayahuasca experience, based on these physiological measurements. So let me read something to you real quick. These are kind of like definitions of more specifically what extended state DMT is. It points to some of these characteristics. Extended state DMT describes an experience of DMT that is stabilized and extended far beyond the average DMT duration using advanced targeted infusion pump technology and a pharmacokinetic model developed by Dr. Gallimore and Dr. Strassman. So the two pieces here is the targeted infusion pump technology, and I'll show you some pictures of what that looks like, but also the pharmacokinetic model. And the pharmacokinetic model, that's the thing that they use to determine how to keep somebody stabilized in an anesthesia, or medicated experience, so they don't get overdosed. The pharmacokinetic model is the new thing that Gallimore really brought to the table. Now, what this means is that the DMT experience can theoretically be programmed, this is the wild part, to specify 3 aspects: the onset speed, the level of the peak, and the duration. So the onset speed is how quickly do you go into the DMT space? Is it a rocket ship or a slow, like a roller coaster going up? the level of the peak. Do you want to have a 20 nanogram a milliliter type experience? Maybe that could be useful for extended state DMT psychotherapeutic purposes. The person's lucid and conscious, but definitely tripping. Or do you want it to be up at this higher level, you know, for an extended period, a full DMT trip? That can be adjusted. And then how long? Because once you turn the machine off, theoretically, the person comes back down after, just as if they had you know, are closing down a complete trip. So after 5 to 7 minutes, perhaps, this person's already coming down. So it can be programmed to come down at a certain time, but it can also be aborted if there's a mental health crisis or like a physical health crisis or something like that. And it can also theoretically be programmed in the present moment, engaged in a way that can be adjusted and the person can go in and out of a peak DMT experience without coming fully out of it. So we believe that exploring these can have significant implications for consciousness research, for mental health, bringing other in mental health, healing experiences for people, but also in a format of like advanced problem solving. Once we figure out if it's safe and how to do it appropriately, what would happen if we put an expert of a particular innovative field, a technologist that was trying to invent something really complex, and what would happen if we gave them this experience? Would they have breakthroughs in their awareness to deep problem? You know, think of Steve Jobs and the iPhone, think of Crick and the DNA, right? Even non-psychedelic altered states experiences like Einstein's E = mc squared. Nikola Tesla had a capacity to enter altered states or higher dimensional states to problem solve. You know, this is the most interesting piece for me to explore, you know. And so, and this is part of that lineage question. That Gallimore, this is another chart in that original paper. Gallimore got the idea of using the infusion pump technology from another group of researchers. They're cited on the bottom here, Gozoulis and Mayfrank. So if anybody wants to explore that, I think it's worthwhile checking out. But they were the first in a research setting to use infusion, like a infusion pump. But they were using it in a way that Gallimore predicted that the DMT was getting stronger over time and not stabilized, and that it is possible to overdose on DMT. It might not kill you, but it's going to be a very confusing experience, you know, overwhelming experience. So, so this is again the difference between just using a pump and using the pump with the pharmacokinetic model. This is the machines. Some examples of the machines. It's pretty simple, you know. But pretty advanced as well. And then this is the pharmacokinetic equation for the maintenance dose. And that what I want to say here is that there are a lot of other variables that haven't been determined to ensure that this work is safe. And so I would be real cautious in exploring this with people who are just engaging it or similar things like it without exploring these deeper questions. I got a few more on this piece, and then we'll open it up for questions. I see that there's a lot of people, and then we'll step into the next start of the presentation. So so remember, we're in a scientific paradigm here, so we're defining things very specifically. It's what extended state DMT is. It's extremely accurate dosing based on these pharmacokinetic principles Onset, speed, intensity, and duration can be programmed. The experience can be aborted. Unlike any other psychedelic experience, it can be aborted if there's an issue. And then no other substances are required. So it's not about like amping the dose up to extreme levels or anything like that. It's about dialing them into a very specific flow rate that is tuned to the psychonaut to reach a very specific mental psychedelic state that is then maintained over a period of time. And then there's been some questions we've been asking people, or people are asking, well, how is this separate? So this isn't, extended state DMT isn't, it's not DMT in a high single dose or repeat doses. I talked about how it's different from ayahuasca or ayahuasca analogs. You're not using an MAOI inhibitor, so it's not DMT mixed with Syrian rue. These are all different things. These are different definitions of things that people have done. It's not a DMT IV drip, or, we've heard of people using the morphine drip. They come back down a little bit and they'll pop the morphine button and go back into the DMT state. It sounds great, but people are coming in and out, and that definitely affects their experiences. And then it's not mixing DMT with other psychedelics, mushrooms or LSD or things to induce a psychedelic, a DMT-like state. And so, this is a question as a harm reduction model. We would just want to be mindful that that going at it and experimenting yourself and doing high doses a whole bunch of times would probably disqualify you more to being a psychonaut than it would qualify you. That we're really looking for skillful, safe, and intentional psychedelic medicine users. And that this is big medicine, that we're engaging in a program that could have global and societal implications, just like psychedelics did in the 60s. The technology that was created with psychedelic influence have both been positive and have had negative consequences. So we want to, think MK Ultra kind of stuff and mind control and things. Use of Prozac, right? The ability to use other medicines that aren't psychedelic came from these ideas of psychedelics affecting us. Learning how to manipulate DNA coming from the original expression of where of what DNA is, has led to genetic manipulation, right? These are really complex and big questions, and so we wish to step into this research really mindful and intentional with our work, and deliberate, taking our time with it. Let's pause there. I'm gonna stop this share for a second, and then I saw that there's a lot of stuff coming on. So anything showing up on this that we should check in around?
Yeah, so there was a question on length. How long would you possibly put somebody in a DMT state using this machine? And then another one kind of in that same realm was, could you mix an MAO, like a monoaminoxide inhibitor, with this as well? And would that increase, the potency?
Yeah, let's answer both of those questions. So, MAOIs are psychoactive. And so even if it's subtle, it does shift the experience. I don't think that, the MAOI is required to ingest a medicine through through your stomach, or DMT, right? So it's actually just not necessary. And so this idea is you're extending the psychedelic experience without having to use other substances. And if an MAOI does, I just thought about this one, but if MAOI does naturally increase a DMT experience, it would take longer to abort the experience. So in some ways, it would make it less safe. Now, to answer the question on how long, yeah, right? Like, how long can we do this? So I finally found somebody who's had and got to interview somebody who's had a extended state like experience using an infusion pump. And this was not with the pharmacokinetic model or anything like that. But, you know, there are people who are doing things like this out in the world. He said his peak experience was about 20 minutes and that was plenty. He said it felt like 7 hours. One of the great things that I thought was fascinating was that the overwhelm eventually went away, because you can only be overwhelmed for so long until you start to normalize to you know, something unfolding around you. And I had this image or this idea, metaphor of like, imagine falling from a really great distance, you know, like you can only scream for so long before you have to take a breath. And then after a while, it might become normalized and even boring. I mean, particularly if you're thinking like falling forever or something. You know, the biggest questions I think are physiological, you know, are the limits. How long can somebody physically stand to be in that space? We don't know. And so we would be dosing it up incrementally. How long can you hold your bladder would be probably be one of the biggest constraints that someone would have, because you can't really get up and take a break to go to the bathroom. You know, you're going to be attached to lots of monitors and things. So, you know, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes sounds really like a great start, but like I would expect maybe if somebody could handle like 3 hours or so. I asked Rick Strassman this question, like, how long would you want to be in it if you did it? And he said, a couple of days, you know. So that's talking about somebody who has some pretty solid resilience.
We'll have to give him a catheter for that.
Yeah, right. A big diaper.
Yeah.
You know, astronauts wear diapers, right? There's some, you know, there's science, sci-fi diapers already out there. We'll have to get some for the experiment. But like, you know, who wants to be in a psychedelic experience with the wet diaper on, you know?
Yeah. There's another question too, like on the topic of MAOI. Would a MAOI have any effect on smoking it? Isn't it only effective with ingestion? So, you know, something like Changa, that's the whole point of Changa, is to add that MAOI to the DMT to prolong it.
Yeah, it does prolong it. You know, you're talking maybe extending it for several more minutes and things like that. We're not talking about any like extreme duration, you know. So yeah, it does extend it, and the Changa is something that people use. It's a free-base Syrian roux that they add to the DMT, and yeah, it's definitely something that people do. Psychonaut diapers. I'm ready for 3 hours. We run this by the entities. So far, they haven't stopped us. Yeah.
There is a cool little discussion here about Owen said medium psychosis. I haven't heard that term before, so I asked him what that meant. And we're talking about the Bardo state, kind of being in between spaces, waiting for rebirth. And so if you could stay in that state, like, would you be entering into that?
The Bardo.
You know, in the Bardo, yeah. And then somebody brought up the story about Terence McKenna giving this stuff to a lama, and the lama saying, you know, it's the lesser lights. You can't go any further. You won't come back. And when I actually had like a really strong experience with psilocybin, and if you guys have listened to Psychedelics, you probably heard me talk about this a bunch of times. But after having a near-death experience and having this really profound mushroom experience, being in that realm reminded me of some sort of Bardo state. And I was like asking the entities that, and it felt like I was in a Bardo state for a little bit. And it always made me like more curious of like, what happens if I could stay in this longer? Do I just end up staying in here and not returning? So that's always been a question of mine as well. It's like, if we can extend this, does that like higher the chance of somebody not coming back,
transcending, not coming back? Yeah. You know, I trust this medicine. I trust people's capacity to do this, and I feel good about this. But yeah, I mean, we have to pay attention to potential for psychosis, particularly psychosis and mania, and then also things that look like broken ego structures, personality disorders, and things like that. You know, like people breaking through so many times that they don't quite land anymore, you know. And so really, you know, I've been receiving a lot of emails from people, you know, being mindful of how often you use this medicine, how much you take each time. And then adding skill sets to these capacities or to the medicine allows you to reduce the actual dosage of the medicine and get to the same place, that sort of thing. So we would be assessing for, people's stability before they do it. And there's a good track record of researchers being able to keep people safe by doing preliminary assessments and limiting who comes. But I think one of the questions, if you watched Gallimore's presentation, that this does something different than just like light up areas of the brain, is that it's literally structuring how the brain receives information in a pretty complex way. And so, like, if you stay in that state long enough, what's going on in the brain, and do those structures start to stabilize in new ways? And so can somebody, suddenly be more aware of the spirit world, walking through a normal life? I wonder about things like that, or is it just psychosis and they haven't landed? Most people who experience things like that, we call a mixed episode, like there is a real psychedelic spiritual phenomenon occurring, but it's so profound that it's kind of blown their circuits a little bit, right? And so so there's going to be some real specific requirements of not using other psychedelics if you're a psychonaut in the study, for an extended period of time, not using other drugs or alcohol, and so forth, to keep people as safe as possible.
Awesome. And there's another question: any concerns about overstimulation of the serotonergic receptors that can contribute / cause serotonin syndrome?
I don't know of anybody who's experienced a serotonin syndrome type of response, but obviously, like we're going to have a doctor and a nurse in the room, and heart rate and other things will be monitored specifically. But let me research that question. I don't know if that's something that people really worry too much about with ayahuasca, or.
Yeah, I haven't heard. Well, I've heard it a little bit about ayahuasca, but I haven't heard anything about that with DMT. Mostly it's like MDMA.
Right. Yeah, right. No, I don't know. I mean, my experience and a lot of people's experience is that this medicine, when used correctly, is revitalizing. It's like some sort of vitamin. You feel new and fresh as opposed to worn out or disgruntled, like some people feel after MDMA experience. So.
And then there was another question, just moved. Will the steady state doses be adjusted for each participant?
Yeah, that's where that pharmacokinetic model comes in, is like learning individual tolerances. Does body type make a difference? Does gender make a difference? Age? There's a lot of factors that the anesthesiologists have learned through the years that, keep the anesthesia safe. And so that's one of the questions that we need to explore, and maybe even work with other research teams to get some, like data on large numbers of people and that sort of thing. One idea though is that we don't have to get the statistical number of like how it's going to react to like a whole population, but one idea we have is to give a single dose DMT experience, even if it's through the machine, just we call it a bolus dose, an injection, and then determine like how long did they stay in the peak, right? And then from just that simple information of that one person, it might be possible to create a flow rate that would be specific for that one person that would be stabilized. That's where the science experiments start coming in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk through an example of how this would be a healing experience? Somebody asked.
Sure. Well, I mean, so many ways, so like a lower dose, it could be like a psychedelic psychotherapy type experience. But, the experiences themselves are healing. And so whether you're getting your brain rewired or you're speaking to your, loved one that's passed away to gain greater clarity on a question, or, entities are coming in and engaging in some sort of weird psychic surgery to extract trauma out of your body. These are common, not uncommon experiences for people on DMT, and then just the nature of the experience itself is healing, that people feel better afterwards. Their personality structure might not be so rigid. And then if the right set and setting and the right container and it's held correctly, that trauma can be healed, right? We want to be really mindful of trauma because it can be such a big experience. Let's go through a little bit more slides. Let me see, I lost my spot here. Let me share a screen. Oh, I got to move this thing again. Just a sec. All right, can you see that, Kyle? Are we all good?
Yep, I'm good.
So just to go over, there's 3 paths that we're considering the FDA approved process in Boulder. It's going to take longer to get that off the ground, but like thinking stability, that's the long-term goal, so we can do this in a way that feels sustainable. Research study in another country, that's my least ideal path because it would be complicated and it would have to happen in a real short period. And we're also seriously looking at this idea of, we got some lawyers exploring this question. We don't know the answer to it yet because DMT is treated differently in some countries than ayahuasca, but doing a scientific experiment, but within a religious context. And, it's pushing some edges, but it is very feasible and possible. But again, we want to do it in a way that's open and safe. And so we have to find a place that would both have, would allow us to do the research, but also with medical support, so these are really big questions. Best case scenario, the more I think about it, the more I want to get on it as soon as possible, would be a religious freedom expedition in another country, maybe in the spring of 2020, given the time we need to take to write the protocol and train everybody and get ready. I think that's realistic to some degree. It might be 2030, but we're hoping not. These are the people on the team. So we're looking for 6 or 8 psychonauts. And we're looking at experiments that would only do one at a time, not multiple psychonauts at once. I'd like to be one of the main facilitators with Dr. Clemens, my principal investigator, who is an incredible therapist. We're actively recruiting a medical doctor to facilitate the infusion pump mechanisms, and talking to somebody about that right now. We don't have a nurse. Facilitator and training, we'd love this to be part of a training program for the future. And then outside of the lab, in the mission control, there would be an assessment expert that did the pre and post assessments, a data technician and camera operator, the EEG, the breathing, monitoring, and all of that. There's going to be a lot of data we can collect there. And then somebody outside of the room that it would be some sort of integration therapist, and then the integration therapist would probably have a team of sitters, to just enjoy the person's company for a little while afterwards. And then a sketch artist. This is my newest addition to the team. Is be interviewed by a sketch artist after you come out of the experience, somebody who's skilled in drawing and illustrating things, and see what kind of images we can get out of something like that. So what does it mean to be a fearless expert? I have this quote from Terence McKenna, excuse me. What we experience in the presence of DMT is real news. It's a nearby dimension, frightening, transformative, and beyond our powers to imagine, and yet to be explored in the usual ways. We must send fearless experts, whatever that may come to mean, to explore and to report on what they find. So this was one of the inspiring quotes that I found when I was researching this, and that, we can do this now with extended-state DMT as opposed to just having these flashes or, unruly, less controllable ayahuasca experience or something. This again, we're dialing it in to a very specific frequency. The fearless expert idea is the idea of we start with a healthy volunteer and we train them, and that and that we all have these skill sets and capacities that are different, and that we're in the handouts you're going to all get tonight, you're going to receive an initial kind of criteria of what we're looking for. So this is one of the areas that we would like to request your feedback on, like the actual criteria. I'm not going to send y'all all of the assessments that we're looking at because that's pretty technical, and I'll talk with Carla about that. I think we need to be mindful of that for the experiment. But if you think about that, there are these different characteristics that we have, and that they can be disordered, right? Mentally healthy, mental health, or physically disordered, or they can be gifted. So an extreme, what does extreme emotional tolerance look like? What is the gifted aspect of that? This ability to stay with something that's really hard to look at and engage. Whereas a disordered response to emotional tolerance would be running away from something that, most people would be able to engage without much stress. Ability to focus in a disoriented state. If you can stay in contact with the experience, it won't change channels so much, versus like a disordered would be more like an ADD, always being on some other idea. Like if you can imagine that being in a DMT state, there's not going to be a lot of capacity to stay with something long enough to get something out of it. Some people are really good at perception, have an inner vision, and some people can report back in the present moment, like be lucid enough to say, this is what I'm experiencing, without shutting that experience down. So that's a skill set that I've noticed with some certain people. This next one, mental stability with openness and ability to surrender, so like you can't just be focused, you got to be able to relax in this state and be open, that we don't want people shut down and just, like powering through it. We want people to be able to relax. Physical and psychological stamina, like how long can we stay in these things? And I worked with advanced mindfulness practitioners and with the cannabis work and other things, and that there are people who have a capacity to simply stay with a psychedelic experience longer than others. And I've seen this with martial artists and like Zen mindfulness practices, transcendental meditation, things that require, focus and resilience. Is there a lot of trauma in the body, or is it something that's been resolved? This in trauma is something that many of us as medicine people have experienced. So it's not a contraindication by any means, but have you been able to engage it? Do you know how to work with it? And are you willing to deal with difficult inner content to engage it? Diplomacy and compassionate communication. This is a skill set that is going to be important for all our team members and things, because it's going to be, it's going to be some setbacks. There's going to be delays. There's going to be conflicts. We're going to be, we're going to have to engage the larger society with something that's pretty radical, right? And so having a capacity to engage that with skill is going to be important. And then this last one, I don't know if it's a joke or not, but like, shouldn't we talk about this? Like, doesn't SETI talk about this? Aren't there like protocols for engaging something that's beyond human? I don't, like the implications of that are complicated. So, but at the very least, you want to, say hello and be kind to whatever entity that shows up in your experience, and to, like be able to explain what you're doing in that space, if that matters, So again, this is just the kind of broad overview of what we're looking for. What you're going to get sent is going to go in a little more detail, and then we're going to keep, breaking it down into more and more concrete criteria. So the role of their psychonauts would be to go through the DMT experiment. First, you would go through what you call I think we should consider reproducing Strassman's data, the experience, but putting it through the infusion pump to get used to it. But it'd be like a regular DMT experience, and we get some good data from you, and then from that data, we would slowly start increasing the length and duration of the experience itself, assess you afterwards, check on you, interview you, make sure you're okay, and then when it felt appropriate, do it again even longer, and you can't ignore the sci-fi fantasy storylines that are very similar to these experiments already. Like, you think I just added Inception to this list, but they, literally they have a briefcase, they're all plugging into it, and they're going into a shared reality, a shared dream state. Flatliners is another really good example of people testing the limits, and then the Matrix is clearly an example too. I like the movie Interstellar is pointing to this higher dimensional aspect. Are we communicating with something that is transcendent but still part of who we are? And then the big question is, what the heck are these things anyway? And Strassman is an angel guy. He's really gone into the DMT and the, what is it called? DMT and the, I'm having a
something prophecy.
DMT
right?
and prophecy. Yeah, I can't believe I'm forgetting that right now. Somebody's probably. Gallimore thinks they're soul of prophecy. Yeah, I just remember now. Gallimore thinks they're like some sort of higher dimensional aliens. You talk to Dennis McKenna. He thinks they're spirits of Gaia, and talking to us. This computer simulation idea is really starting to show up a lot more. And then from a psychological perspective, neurological perspective, there are aspects of self that are being somehow visually represented in a really complex form. Irregardless, it's a really interesting question. And this isn't okay, so I'll just say this. There are scientists. If you read Inner Paths to Outer Space by Rick Strassman, it's a group of essays by some pretty intelligent medical doctors and philosophers of what is this space. Are we tapping into psychedelic or other dimensional reality? What kind of mechanisms could show that we can do that scientifically? There are people, really smart people, asking, how can we prove the existence of another reality? Quantum physics, really starts to address those questions of like multiple parallel dimensions and things with slightly different physical characteristics, right? There's a lot of theories on this, and this isn't my primary question right now. I'm really thinking we need to focus on the science and the research, but this is definitely a question that's in the air, and again, we want to acknowledge that we consider the possibility that something other than human is going on here. This is the Alchemy Lab. There's 4 sitters in the room, with the facilitator in training kind of being where they need to be. Like if they need to sit with somebody outside of the room, or, if they can be in the room. There's a lot of medical equipment. We'd have sensors and, like EEG, breathing sensors, but also cameras to record the experience. And then maybe, some sort of sensors, to just kind of feel the vibe of the room. And the fusion pump, the medical doctor and the nurse would be kind of behind the person. The guides would be next to the person. And then there'd be some sort of non-religious image that was comforting in some way for the person. And this is the future DMT experiment, talking about the idea of making a machine somehow connected with an advanced algorithm to throw in all of those covariants that we don't know what they are yet to create a stable state DMT experiment or experience for someone. The AI could also monitor vitals so that if there was a medical crisis, it could abort it automatically. And then there would be someone holding space and sitting for the person. And then taking that a step further, it's not beyond our imagination to consider, once we figure out it's safe again and how long we can do it for and all of that. This is a question of, like, can we prove it by having can we prove the existence of some other reality by having multiple people in it at once? Because if they're all having the same experience, maybe they can communicate. Maybe they can tell us that they're communicating, and they can tell us what the other person's saying. Maybe these people are in different rooms, right? So there's a lot of parapsychology research that's similar to something like this. like psychic ability type stuff. So that's, before we go into the next part, we're doing pretty good on time. I'm going to talk about mindfulness practices now and give you some assignments. Is there anything on your end, Kyle?
Yeah, there are a few questions here and there. Do you want to answer some questions now?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
If it's okay if you just read them, I'll keep it.
Yeah, sure. Would it be possible not being able to return in terms of consciousness? What if a volunteer psychonaut could return to his body, but his consciousness stayed in the other realm or part of it? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's called shamans and guides and mystics, and and then there's some people that are psychotic because of things like that, so yeah, there are people that can access other realms in natural ways, or it's a common part of their lives, or they see spirits or communicate with ancestors, right? These are not uncommon life experiences. So, can this be a tool that allows us to develop that capacity, is a question that I have.
Mm-hmm. So there's a duration peak, but what about intensity?
The intensity, like, is there a limit to the intensity?
Yeah, is there a way to increase intensity? I'm guessing they're asking it, like higher doses of DMT, or does DMT kind of cap off at a certain dose and certain experience?
Yeah, what I know of with really high doses of DMT and overdoing it, like, I think it is conceivable to overdose with DMT again, and what that looks like is just like a fragmented, disjointed, like radically psychedelically visual, maybe overwhelmingly emotional experience where you just don't bring a lot back from, and you're maybe discombobulated and frazzled, and I have clients that come to me who have had experiences like that, either in ayahuasca or other thing, and some of them are very healing, and others are just hard and have to be worked through. So remember that line, right? That's the intensity, and at the typical peak is about 100 nanograms a milliliter, or whatever that is. At the above that line, about 150 is the max that appears to be useful, and anything above that is just a disjointed energy. But a question is, can we develop a resilience and a tolerance to these states so that we can access higher DMT experiences without feeling disjointed? And I don't know the answer to that right now, but it might be something that we could explore. But that'll be like several research experiments down the line.
I just think of like high dose stuff, and I just think of Kalindi IE, like eating like 20-30 grams of mushrooms. So
yeah, and and then with mushrooms there's a tolerance factor. So I started with 20-30 grams of mushrooms, right? And this, again, when you add skill to a medicine experience, it's not about how much of a dose you can tolerate. It's about how skillfully can you use the dose, and that with skill set development and mindfulness practices, again, you can get to the same place on a lower dose, and it might happen where, like, DMTx Psychonauts become more sensitive to the medicine, and they can be in the breakthrough state at 80 or at 60, right? And that physiologically and neurologically, I think, is safer than staying at these high doses for extended periods.
Yeah, and sometimes that's kind of like the shamanic viewpoint of like initiation, break them through with high doses, and then the shaman's kind of always there. They can take small doses or just commune with that. So somebody,
that's how I am with cannabis at this point. I've done the work in intentional settings so much. Like, I can have very profound experiences, and that's opposite of what we understand about cannabis, is that you're supposed to become more like you get the tolerance to it, and you have to smoke more to engage these states. And I'm a pretty decently regular smoker, and I'm entering psychedelic states using cannabis in these sessions very regularly.
I'm right there with you. I'm pretty sensitive to it. My friends are like, how the hell does that even happen to you? I have no idea. Somebody asked about FDA approval. I said there's no FDA approval yet, but what do you think, like, the chances of that happening, of like going through that process?
Yeah. I'm grateful that I have Carla on the team to really engage that question. She's already researching the IRB requirements, and she's recruited a whole team of Naropa students who were helping her with that. A lot of them are on this thing, so if anybody wants to say, hey, that's on that team, just send a shout out. So yeah, that's not my primary job. You know, I'm wanting to focus on the training program and like organizing the larger image. Yeah. But yeah, I want to do it in my hometown. I want to do it in Boulder, and so that's the long-term goal. The world is so wild right now that you know, we can conceive of future possibilities where we don't have to get FDA approval, you know, in the United States. At this point, like, things are really interesting on an international, you know, societal, national level right now. So I'm not thinking that it's going to be a major barrier, but I could be totally wrong. But again, we have a backup plan, or, you know, several backup plans. So again, one thing I don't want to do and name this is that I'm not interested in doing this underground or legally. We wouldn't be having this conversation. This isn't a cover for something that we're doing here already. I've never done extended state DMT. You know, I don't personally know anybody that's done extended state DMT. You know, I know people who use DMT, and I know people who've figured out ways to, you know, increase the duration of it, but through, you know, other means, but that's not extended state DMT. So I'm not interested in pushing that edge. This is a big enough edge as it is. So.
Yeah, definitely. There's a question about, do you have any thoughts about the cost and logistics of obtaining sufficient quantities of medical grade DMT for the trials?
Yeah, I mean, it would have, if we did it in state, it would have to be an FDA or a DEA Schedule 1 license. I don't know what the cost is of that would be, but comparatively speaking, it's not going to be the biggest expense, you know. So we would, if we did it in state, it would be a DEA Schedule 1 licensed facility. Then we would have it tested by another facility to ensure its purity and all of that. If we did it in another country, I'm sure there's mechanisms of getting medicine, but it would still be tested a lot before we gave it to anybody to ensure that it was pure. So even if we did it out of the country, the standards of where, you know, our safety standards would still be pretty extreme. And so, do
you remember what MAPS paid, or they're trying to fundraise for their, what are they trying to get, a kilo of MDMA or 5 kilos? It was like $1 million or something.
Yeah, or $500,000, something like that, or $1 million. Yeah, I mean, MDMA on, you know, the black market is cheaper than for research, but it's not MDMA if you're getting it off the black market. You know, so yeah, we want to be real intentional about where we get the medicine. Another question is, does it have to be synthetic, or can it be extracted from a natural source? And I'm not 100% sure on that. I would love it to be extracted as opposed to synthetic. But there's, you know, putting it in the infusion pump and all of that, that's something that's not my question to answer.
Yeah. There's another one. Is there going to be any attempt to have a diverse team of psychonauts?
Yeah, if you look at, you're going to receive that worksheet. If you go to the bottom of those criteria, gender diversity and cultural and racial diversity is something that we really want to promote and support. That, you know, the psychedelic community has some, you know, class and race issues that we want to acknowledge. So we also want to make it diverse in class and what's the word I want to use? Accessibility, you know, to people who have, you know, who don't have the means to like travel to wherever we're going to go on their own. That once a psychonaut's approved and is going to go on the expedition, we would actually pay you at that point, you know. So we don't want it just to be people that look like me, you know, and we're already doing pretty well with that. I'm happy to say, not to exclude anybody either. We don't want to exclude anybody. That you know, the skill sets are the most important piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is something we're actively. I mean, this is 2017. You know, like you know,
2018.
2018. Yeah, well, I don't even know where I am anymore. 2018, right? We want to be conscious of that question.
Yeah. So there was just one more
Funny word.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the FDA thing. As I scrolled down, I saw somebody commented. What's the biggest difference between this attempt for FDA experimentation compared to the Strassman's experiment with FDA?
Yeah, I mean, like Strassman started this, right? Started the whole psychedelic renaissance, and Guyon was the very first to break through that barrier in the early 90s. We're in a completely different territory than he was at that time. And like, I'm actively out talking about this, talking about entities and things. And Strassman was pretty much just a psychiatrist, testing the safety and drug abuse potential of this random chemical that he proposed to NIDA, and so we're in a completely different space. And I don't know if like that's a good thing that I'm so out, but I'm not the only one talking about this thing. Gallimore is like, I mean, Gallimore is really out about his interest too, so we're again, we're showing up as psychedelic people, and seeing what happens, seeing if we can show up and and be treated like human beings. So that's part of the process. And again, that's why I have a backup plan for an out of country one. I'm doing this. We're going to do this. I'm pretty confident that we're going to do this.
I hope so. And there's just one more quick question. Is Rick going to be part of this project at all?
Rick is indirectly a part of it. He's a friend and somebody I asked, a mentor that somebody I asked questions, but he's done with research. It was a big and difficult experience to do research in the 90s and to not have the level of support that we do. So he's interested. I mean, he wrote the paper with Gallimore, so he's obviously interested. He's obviously interested in things that are beyond, psychological phenomenon, because he's written several books about it, right? Mm-hmm. But I haven't asked for his endorsement, and I'm not going to anytime soon. I want to make sure we have like a super solid protocol and before I go to that space with him. But yeah, I mean, I wrote him an email today telling him what update we have and stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah, if y'all are ready, is there any last pieces? We have about 30 minutes, so I want to make sure we get to the most important piece, I guess.
No, I think I covered everything. I'm sorry if I missed anybody's question.
Well, right again, and you can also email us, DMTx@medicinalmindfulness.org. That'll get me directly. And yeah, this is the point of this, is to start a conversation. So I will read it. Again, be mindful of length, because there's a lot of people on this. All right. Okay. Let's see, I don't know what I have. So foundational practices. We're terrible at foundational practices, generally speaking, as a psychedelic community, because we can just take something and be off into another reality that's a lot of fun and very stimulating. But if we incorporate these foundational practices, then we can do even more, So I want to promote it also as a safety thing too. The more we can incorporate a psychological practice like going to therapy, the more we can incorporate yogic practices, martial arts practices, staying physically healthy, neurologically healthy, taking supplements for brain health, that sort of thing. The longer we can do this medicine work and stay vital. And that we have a huge history of elders in our communities who have been able to use these medicines safely for 50, 60 plus years of life or more. But we want to think of this as that we can develop, we all have a capacity to develop areas in our lives. And then if we get in the pilot seat of the experience, as opposed to just taking a medicine and letting it do something to us, there are certain things we start to explore. And I think of this as skill, resilience, and power. Skill is just simply knowledge and ability to respond to something novel or different. Resilience is the ability to tolerate, accept, or recover from an experience. So if you imagine, like, there are pretty extreme states, and like, let's take the example of entering a state of terror, right? That if you're not resilient emotionally, then you're going to get the hell out of there as quick as you can. You're going to turn around energetically, at very least. You're going to disconnect from the experience. But sometimes these experiences like terror or fear or anxiety are the entry points into deeper spaces. So the more you can stay with something and tolerate it, the further you can go in an experience. And then power is a term the ability to transmute, transform, or alter an experience within a given time frame. Like, can you do something with this? Like I mentioned kind of jokingly at the beginning, like getting eaten by a bush in a DMT experiment, or experience, like I was just overcome by this thing that was chewing on me, but I had this innate sense of awareness that I wasn't able to penetrate my energetic awareness, that I felt safe and secure. Whereas at other times in previous, maybe in the beginning of my experimenting and things, that something like that, I would have felt it inside. It would have been scary or something, right? So there was a resilience and then a capacity to, like, okay, I don't enjoy this experience. I can surrender into it if I want to, but I can also have a capacity to get out of that experience and know that I can get out of that experience, right? And so when we develop these capacities, what we want to do, cannabis is different than DMT, right? You can develop these capacities with other medicines, but DMT, like, these have to become automatic processes. You just have to be able to do them. And we're going to talk about, like, to have resilience, because you're just going to be so in the experience. So let's talk about some of these inner capacities. And again, our goal is to develop them so that we can skillfully engage them simultaneously and automatically. And these are important capacities in the DMT experience because it's such an extreme state, and it's so fast. You can't really think about, like, it'd be like we call it a psychedelic martial arts practice. You can't think about fighting when you're in a fight. If you think about blocking a punch before you block it, that punch has already landed, right? When you work out in martial arts, there's certain capacities that become so ingrained, like a body awareness, a body memory of it, that it just happens, right? And you just block the punch, right? And so there are certain capacities that are important for a psychonaut to develop. So I'm going to go through these real quick. I'm pretty sure we're good on time and everything to just take a little bit of attention to some of these things. I've made some notes. And then the assignment is going to be a mindfulness practice that brings all of these capacities together into a practice that you can develop. So if you're not aware of what proprioception is, that basically just means your inner body awareness. And also it's how much tension you're holding in a location in your body. Why this is important is a lot of trauma is stored in the body. So when we become aware of it, we can do something about it. And that this proprioceptive awareness, this inner awareness, isn't just connected to our physical body, but it seems to extend to an energy awareness as well, right? And so, like, our light body, and then further beyond, we can connect to a space, an awareness of a space. It's also the foundation of, navigation capacities. Like, you're traveling to a location in your body with your awareness, then you can travel outside of your body as well. So to just test proprioception, just to give you an idea, it's like become aware of your left pinky and where it is in relationship to your body, right? You're immediately aware of it. Now become aware of your right big toe. Become aware of both of them simultaneously. You can discern a relationship between those two locations if you kind of just rest in it, right? And so where they are physically between each other. In more advanced states and with psychedelics, this is something that happens with our cannabis work too. There's a synesthesia that occurs, and that I call visual proprioception. It's this capacity to literally think, to believe, to really experience a capacity of seeing inside of your body by developing proprioception with, what you would consider visual awareness. And so that's pretty significant capacity that is very useful. This is also related to the earth element, so physical body, right, an earth element. We underestimate the capacity of our breath as psychedelic community, as any community, right? And it's actually one of our most valuable resources. And so when we only breathe to here, that's a good indication of anxiety. When we breathe into our chest only, it can increase anxiety. But if we learn to breathe into our bellies, you can't see me, I'm holding my belly. Push our belly out with our breath. This is called a belly breath, and relaxing. If we can learn a capacity or develop a capacity to breathe into our bellies when we get startled or anxious, we will then be able to navigate and engage in incredibly profound psychedelic states by using our capacity of breathing to move energy around. Breath is related to energy. It's related to many religious and spiritual traditions associated with like spirit, spiritus, shakti, chi, all energies that move with the breath. And then I didn't know this until I started, just kind of mucking around, but the term psyche, like as in psychedelic, psyche refers to the mind, right? And also possibly the soul. But another word in the ancient Greek that it translates to is breath. And I didn't know that until maybe last year. So the goal is to make the skillful breathing automatic so that, and I've actually trained myself, as a facilitator, we need to be able to stay focused and conscious in really stressful situations. And that instead of holding my breath when I get startled, I've learned to breathe into a startle. And so just shifting a dynamic as simple as that can really change your capacity to engage in experience. So the breathing practice I would like you all to practice with this is a simple breathing in the belly technique. There's nothing real special about it, but it is a slow, deliberate breath. I like to breathe in through my nose and out my mouth. It's not a requirement, but I'll just do it a few times. But you're breathing in the belly. The belly seems to be the requirement of getting energy to flow through your system. If you're just breathing up here, this energy movement becomes stagnant. So it's like this. Just slow, steady, a little bit of pause on the top and the end, just letting it all out and relaxing. In the MDMA work, they call it I think Dr. Mithofer has a funny word for it, the diaphragmatic breathing or something. It's what they use to help you enter a deep state of relaxation as you're peeking into the experience. All right. There's other breath and practices that I'm going to teach you, but that's the primary one. We're also, if we extend this out past the 4, I want to teach you all how to do breath work as a trauma resolution modality. But any practices, holotropic breath work, rebirthing breath work, Wim Hof, are all really good skill sets to explore if you want to do this. All right. Let me see if there's. The other thing I want to name is that another strategy of breathing that's very important in medicine work is that if you feel a tension in your body, even if it's not in your chest, say it's a pain in your knee or something, is that metaphorically or energetically we can imagine breathing into an area of tension or pain, and that process, you're bringing your proprioception to that area, like my knee, I'm breathing into it. Oftentimes that pain or sensation will start to dissipate pretty quickly, So this idea of breathing into an area is very important. Focused awareness. So again, if you can't stay with something long enough for it to transform, there's not much you can do in these spaces. You're just going to keep playing and dancing, and not much is, it's going to be a great experience, but not much is happening. But if you stay focused on an area, energy moves to it naturally, and that awareness is in and of itself healing and transformational. It's related to the fire element, bringing intensity and energy to an area to burn through it and clear it. Right, our awareness as a as a laser beam or a focus light. So Zen meditation, transcendental meditation, meditating with a candle flame and simply trying to stay in contact, and focus. Like Zen meditation is a very focused, oriented capacity, but we want to be able to develop our capacity to stay focused in psychedelic states. The other thing about focus is that it can change shape, and so I want you to bring your awareness to the tip of your pinky, right? It's like really intense right there. But you can also zoom out your focus and become aware of your whole hand. Pretty simply, it's like you're focusing. It's like a capacity to zoom in and out. Now bring your whole awareness to your arm, including your hand. It's like you can zoom in and out with focus, bringing awareness to your whole body. Right? It's just like a broad focus. The capacity to focus and awareness can extend beyond our bodies in psychedelic states, right? So becoming one with the universe is an example of like just becoming aware of the universal nature of our experience. So that's broad versus sharp. And then obviously the capacity to surrender. You can't just stay so focused and resilient and tolerate everything that you don't enjoy the experience, you don't relax into it. That actually relaxing is an important capacity that we need to develop as psychedelic medicine people. It's a prerequisite from entering these deeper states. And one concept that we want to really highlight is, like, if you feel a tension, it's not about getting rid of the tension, it's about relaxing into the tension. And what that means is allowing it to be there and bringing awareness, relaxing, acceptance into an experience allows it to be transformed and healed and transmuted and things. And this is related to the water element. If you think of dissolving, tension, energy as a water element. There's two images that I'd like to share with you as you do the relaxation meditation I'm going to recommend. Is you can imagine your body or tension, your cells, like a sponge, like a dry sponge. And when you pour water on a dry sponge, it just naturally expands. And that's what's happening physically in the body. The more you relax the tension, the more the muscles and the actual organs themselves, the cells expand out and create more space, and that allows movement and energy. So play with the idea of receiving energy like a sponge would receive water, and then using the analogy of water another way is a spot of tension in the body. What happens to a salt when you run water over it is that the layers of it naturally dissolve and clear. And so as we're moving energy or an awareness through our body, tensions like salt just start to dissolve. And we can this is a real common experience. I've had it myself, right? Like a spot of tension will slowly start to dissipate and clear because it's like dissolving away from, as if it's being cleared with water. So I want you to play with that. I'm going to go over a couple more concepts, and then we're going to go get to the assignment. Under knowing, understanding, intuition. This is connected to the air element, the mind and mental capacity, the ability to discern what's going on and to name what's going on. Like it's more useful if you have a process that you can name it, and then once you name it, then you can do something with that. You can transform it, or at least describe it to somebody else and get some ideas on it. And so our capacity to know what to do with an experience is something that's developed over time as we engage these experiences. So one of the most important practices we can do, this is a simple mindfulness practice, is to name what's occurring in any present moment. Do you notice a sensation of pain in your body? You name it. What kind of pain is it? Is it a burning pain, a sharp pain, a dull pain? Is there an emotional experience occurring? Can you actually name the emotions that you're feeling? Some people struggle with these questions. Or if it's a complex emotion, can you name the complexity of what you're feeling? So like love is a complex emotion that could include both incredible joy and deep grief. simultaneously, right? And so being able to name the experiences are important. And it also allows us to create a language of understanding, right? If you're able to, Kyle, if you're able to describe your experience to me articulately, then I can receive that information and understand it more than if you're like, yeah, that was numinous. Yeah, that was amazing. It's like, okay, great. Tell me more, So it's important to be able to name. And then the last piece that I wanted to talk about is engaging energetic releases and discharges, right? So this is how trauma is healed. Stan Groff talks about a symptom, importance of a symptom. It's something halfway out of your system, halfway out of your body, right? So if you're feeling a tension or pain, you relax into it, allow it to happen. It will leave your system. So if you're feeling anger, if you relax into it, anger as a symptom, it'll clear. Grief, you feel grief as it clears and leaves the body. But also there can be shaking and vibrations occurring in the body. So being able to relax and allow those to happen is a very healing experience. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the second class, but like a twitch in the body, a jolt, a big emotional release, crying, things like that are all forms of energetic discharges. And so there's a way to understand them and to name them. And then, okay, I named it. I know what this is. This is what I do to engage it, right? So that's it. I mean, those are the capacities that, as foundational capacities that we're looking for people to experiment with us. And then this is how you develop it. I've done a lot of meditation work. I came across the body scan when I was 12, and so it's something I've had a lot of experience with. But it wasn't until much later that I realized the significance of it. But you might be aware of the body scan, but the body scan practice incorporates all of these aspects into one practice that you can do in 20 minutes to an hour, right? And so it's like the learning how to kick and punch in a martial arts, doing those sun salutations in yoga, right? This is my opinion, this is our equivalent to that, and that these help us develop these capacities. Now, I want to say something to everybody that we all have gifts, but they can always be further developed. Giftedness is a pretty common characteristic of most members of the psychedelic community, so it's not that I can do that or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's great, but can you do it even better? Can you develop these capacities even more? This is what we want to explore with everybody. So the foundation that we're all working from is already gifted, right? Let's pump that up a little bit. So it helps develop these capacities, but it's also the foundation to help us clear trauma, to stay resilient. It's like a psychic flossing. It's something that, you might not want to do every day, but as healers, it's something that I do on a pretty regular basis, and I recommend to all other healers to do, is to have something you return to just clear out that stuff we pick up on a day-to-day basis. And that when the body scan is used in conjunction with tools like cannabis or other psychedelics, it can be utterly profound and very, very evocative. When you hold gently still, a lot of strange things start happening in the body, even when you're not on medicines. So we're about 10 minutes out. I think I just have one or two more screens, and then we'll open it up. And if, for instance, we got started a few minutes late, I'm not requiring it to end at 9, but I do want to, complete this little piece. So I'm going to be sending you all a worksheet on how to do the body scan. And you're also going to receive a link on my website to download a body scan meditation for free. This is something we developed, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago or something. It's pretty decent. I definitely learned how to use my voice by listening to myself and making this recording. We put a lot of good effort in it. It's simple visualization. It goes about 20 minutes, and then there's about 40 more minutes of just gentle music. And the resting place after a body scan is actually where the healing takes place, where you're no longer focusing on your body, you're just resting in the experience. So I would like you to explore that. You're going to be laying down. The most important pieces are breathing in your belly and not moving so much. So if you feel an itch on your face, don't scratch it. That's a discharge. And if you scratch it, that kind of suppresses the discharge. If you feel a jerking happening, let it happen, And your legs are going to be uncrossed. So you're going to be in Savasana, which is a yogic pose, hands to your sides. Or some people put hands on their belly and a hand on their chest. And the benefit of putting a hand on your belly is that you can test whether or not you're actually moving your belly as you're breathing. All right, so do it that way. All right, and I won't go over what I'm sending you to read. And then this is a foundational practice for more advanced practices, and I'd like us to explore them. Next class, we're going to talk about tracking and trauma resolution, and then a practice that I named the 5 awareness practice. So it's like being able to discern on all levels. It's like the 5 awareness practices, our capacity, different ways of perceiving. And if we can develop all of those ways of perceiving, we get a nice, clear picture in the psychedelic state. So you're going to get a handout. Basically, I'd like you to try it out. Try out the body scan. If you're real serious about this, I'd recommend 3 times. If you're a healer already and an explorer, it's something you can do daily. It's really great. And don't skip it because you already know how to do it. That would be like thinking about learning how to punch versus actually punching. Those are 2 different things. And that it's not just doing a meditation. It's you do it over and over and over again, and you're developing these capacities and resiliences. And again, if I'm going to put you into a DMT, extended-state DMT state, I want to know that you're going to be capable of taking care of yourself in that. Your safety is pretty important to me. So even though you know how to do it, I don't know you know how to do it. And so objectively speaking, we're going to be putting you through the rigors of a lot of assessments. So and even neuro scanning, breathing practice, and stuff. So we're going to be doing a lot of these assessing. I'd like to, if anybody's creative, inspired, draw some art of DMT, send it to us. Write a 1 or 2 page description of a profound DMT experience that you've had, but also name why it was important in your life and how it mattered. So we want to start collecting information like this so we can use it to better promote our work. And then you're going to get the Psychonaut criteria. That this is a draft. This is not set in stone. And again, I don't know if I would even qualify for, if we were going to say the ideal candidate, I don't know if I would qualify for that, honestly. So this is about safety and inclusion. And that even if you've been diagnosed with a mental health concern by a mental health professional that would normally exclude you from an experiment like this, we would reassess you for things like that because we've been misdiagnosed in our community quite a bit. So things like borderline, bipolar, mania, psychosis, there are sometimes psychedelic factors and ways of healing these things that ADD, right? These are things that you do the body scan, you'll be able to clear a lot of these things out. You do the breathwork practice we want to teach you, you start using medicines with intention, you can heal these things and would still qualify. One of the primary things though is that if you're on medications, right? These are things that would interfere with the physiology of the DMT, right? And so we have the capacity to assess somebody's ability to wean off of medication. Maybe they don't need it. And then also we know how to monitor people who are weaning off in case there's a withdrawal period that mimics why they're on the medicine to begin with. So really it's about is your body clean, and then we'll do this quick announcements and then we'll open it up for questions and and then that's it. So, Kyle, do you want to mention what's going on at Psychedelics today?
Yeah, sure. So Joe and I have partnered up with Myco Meditations, Eric Osborne. He has a great little retreat center down in Jamaica. He's been offering legal mushroom retreats down there because mushrooms are legal down in Jamaica, which is kind of cool. So he's asked us to come down to do some breath work and help facilitate a legal mushroom retreat. So that is on May 16th to May 23rd. It's a week-long retreat in Jamaica. You can find out more information on Psychedelics today. I think we have a thing under our events, or if you go to mycomeditations.com, you can fill out an application if that sounds interesting. And, I would just check out Myco Meditations. They have a lot of different things coming up. There's also a women's retreat coming up in March with Catherine McQueen and I think her friend Elaine Hall, who's like an art therapist or does expressive art stuff. So really cool. I'm really excited to check it out. And that's kind of it on our end for events and whatnot.
Right.
We have our Psychedelics, Navigating Psychedelics course. I'm kind of in the process of rearranging some things with that. So
Yeah, and we're using his course Navigating Psychedelics as like a really good overview and component to our programming as well. So we really highly recommend what they're doing. They've got a lot of great facilitators speaking on it too. So I definitely recommend that. One of the criteria is you got to know a little bit about psychedelics to be part of our program. This is for the psychedelic community, so this would be a good way to learn some basic, understanding. And if you're not going to get your master's in psychedelic facilitation, this is a good thing for you. On my end, we've got this is a busy week for medicinal mindfulness. So community breath work is this Thursday. It's tomorrow night. I'll be facilitating the music on this one, and I've got 2 new student facilitators who are spectacular that are holding space for the group, and I'll be there as well. Again, breath work is a way to prepare for DMTx, so we got the program already going. Saturday night, for those who are local, we have a conscious cannabis circle, and that's like the best way I can describe it is like a mini MDMA psilocybin experience. The experience itself is about 2.5 hours long, and it's kind of held in a pre and post set and setting container. It's really wonderful. People who have experienced ayahuasca or DMT can sometimes tap back into the ayahuasca-like experience with cannabis. So it's a real psychedelic experience. Even if you don't believe me, we do this all the time, and it's wonderful. I'm deeply inspired by it. We also have a program called Psychedelic Sitter School. So if you want to go, if you're coming from out of town, you want to have it's a 4.5-day experience. And we have 4 of these this year. The next one is February 28th through the March 4th or something like that. And we have guide work training. So if you want to learn how to be a guide, we teach classes on that as well. Our principal investigator, Carla Clemens, is working with the IRB. So this isn't technically part of the research, because we don't have IRB approval or anything for this piece of it. And so Carla is going to start the process of engaging the community through the research paradigm and IRB approval process with anonymous surveys. Like, we want to know about people's experiences in the community. And then all of this is gearing up for a DMTx Psychonaut training retreat. I think it's early September 2018. And I promise by the end of this webinar, I'll have more details on that. It's a 5-day experience. I have to figure out how to put it in the IRB or not. But I'm hopeful that we can get some real psychonaut, solid psychonaut applicants and trainees. And then after that, we will put you through like a many-month process of developing the skill sets that we're starting to talk about here. But think of it as a psychedelic boot camp, being in yoga, meditation, lectures, breathwork experiences, psychedelic cannabis experiences, and breathwork cannabis experiences. We're gonna push some edges to see how much you can hold and go for, right? Because if you can't do it with breathwork, we're not gonna let you do it with DMT. So. if you want to sign up for any of these events, email our good friend Andy at events@medicinalmindfulness.org, and she can help you get set up. If you have any questions around the content of this class, email me at DMTx@medicinalmindfulness.org. All right. That's it.
Awesome.
So yeah, before we close, let's open it up to one more round of questions, and I don't want to make it too long because I want to honor the time constraint. I got to figure out how to stop this. There we go.
Yeah, you just hit stop.
Yeah. Hey everybody, it's good to be back on the big screen, I guess.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, we have a few questions here. Are you familiar with neurogenic tremoring, TRE, relevant RE shaking experiences you mentioned?
I'm not actually. I'd be happy to read more about it. But yeah, like trauma resolution as a like a shaking experience and clearing it out of the nervous system in that way is a somatic therapeutic, practice that a lot of people are exploring. So I know of several techniques that explore that, like somatic experiencing, sensory motor, others. So the MDMA research is all about shaking that shit out of your body.
Breath work too. We do a lot of shaking.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of shaking and trembling and breath work. So
the work of Peter Levine really kind of put that into perspective when I was reading one of his books. He talked a lot about the shaking and how that's kind of how the nervous system resets. And
yeah, you got to get it out of your body somehow. You got to shake it out. And then like, that's why a lot of soldiers have PTSD is they tighten it and they don't let it out. So it accumulates and jacks up our system, glitches it out. So.
Yeah. Will we be learning will we be learning how to, I'm guessing, use cannabis as a psychedelic as part of this webinar?
That, if we extend the webinar to additional beyond the 4, that will be something that I would love to teach. And it is very teachable. So, and our goal is, as an organization, is to spread this knowledge as much as we can. So yes, there's very specific ways to make cannabis psychedelic, and I want to share them. It's just I want you to have these foundational skill sets. I don't want you to jump. I mean, you're going to go, but several of y'all are going to go try smoking pot and do this right now. So have fun with that. But don't forget to do the body scan. Do the body scan on cannabis. It's really a beautiful, loving, healing experience.
Yeah. Let's see. Owen just said, definitely interesting work for the brain scans. We will be looking at the default mode network in real time and monitor changes induced by DMT. So Owen, are you actually doing some of this research, or you were at Imperial? That'd be really awesome to know. I'm really interested because I know they are. They've kind of started.
Yeah, they're all the DMT psychonauts are going to have the cap on their heads, and we actually have a new experimental prototype cap that we're looking to use, and so that'll be part of the training, is preparing you to have something kind of gripping your head and relaxing into the space and not letting it affect you. So maybe we'll all walk around with these big caps on our head, but yeah, it'll be monitored. I don't know if you saw, the technician will be, monitoring brainwave activity right there, in addition to, heart rate and other safety factors, so that's out of my area of expertise, but we already have someone on the team that's looking into that. She's watching it right now, and there she is, and that we're just beginning with that one. Yeah,
cool. Somebody asked, are you going to email us paperwork?
Yeah, I'll email that to you right after this. So I'll get off of this and email it to you. So.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of network spinal analysis? Much of what you talked about with the body awareness really made me think of this technique of chiropractic.
Yeah, send me some information on it. Yeah, this is again why we want to connect with the community, because there's a lot of gifted people in our community. So please send me info you think I should look at.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, some others in the chat. Will neurological issues like sensory processing disorder be a problem?
That is a question I don't know the answer to, but I know several people who would be able to answer that. So you can email me and I can forward that to Carla and also our other assessment person, and we will look into it.
Sweet.
But don't assume that you're disqualified. I don't want anybody to assume that whatever you got, you're disqualified already. That's not the point of this. There isn't a safety assessment online on our website that you can review to kind of like see if you have any yellow or red flags regarding using psychedelics. And there'll be a link in your homework assignment.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just want to check time. If there's a few more questions we'll ask, but if you need to go for any reason, feel free to jump off. This will be put up on Teachable, so you can come back and listen to any other questions. But yeah, just feel free to take care of yourself and leave if you need to. I know it's getting late.
Let's just do a couple more questions and we'll close it out. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, recorded, Julie. And it'll be on Teachable. So if you came in late, it'll all be online.
Yeah. How to balance positive set and setting with the hospital surroundings? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, no shit, right? So an edge I would love to push, even if we did it in Boulder, Colorado, it wouldn't be in a hospital. I don't know how feasible that is. We might have to bring the hospital to us. So that would be an edge I would like to try to push, even if we went through the FDA approval process. The MDMA studies have been able to say we don't have to do this in the hospital. The requirement is that where they do it is 10 minutes from a hospital, right? But there's the medical doctor that I'm recruiting right now for the infusion process is an emergency medical doctor, so we would feel very confident that we could handle a medical crisis. I don't think that it's very likely that there will be a medical crisis. Dr. Strassman has already proven that it's pretty safe. And if we did something out of country, we would work at a retreat that had medical backup. So it would be a retreat setting, a spiritual setting, but there would be not just the doctor in the room, but a medical team down the hallway. So. And we're already finding possible locations like that. We just need to figure out the legality of it.
Yep. Sweet. And then can you just say your email one more time, and I'll also put it in the chat room.
DMTx@medicinalmindfulness.org. And that's for this project and everything, but that's what I'm using to organize the questions. And if you want any info on the retreats or events, you want to register for any of that stuff, it's events@medicinalmindfulness.org. So.
All right. Well, that looks like that's it for questions. And yeah, we don't want to go too over time. So thanks so much for everybody to join this first part of 4, right? And
next Wednesday, same time.
Yep.
You should we're already registered, so we don't have to go through that process again. Just use that link to show up.
Yeah, Zoom should send you guys links out again. If they don't, just go back in your email and click that Zoom link that it sent you. So,
yeah. So everyone, we are so excited about this. It's okay. It's wonderful to be excited about this. There's no shame in that. We want to jump into a major expedition. And it's very unusual, but we're doing it in a grounded way. We want to do it in a safe way, and we want to do it in a way that connects our community. So everybody here, you participating allowed me again to have the time to develop this presentation and to develop the ones we're going to do. So this is the foundation of the training. So we really want to hear your feedback. All right.
Yeah.
So thank you again, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Kyle, you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, you did good. So, all right.